Speed. It's something that I feel humanity has become bored with. It wasn't that long ago, though, when humanity had an absolute obsession with high speed. In 2000, the Concorde was still flying, still launching businessmen across the Atlantic at twice the speed of sound. In 2007, there was a video that went absolutely viral, and in this era of the internet, a video had to be absolutely amazing to go viral. And that video was, of course, the video of Project V150, when the French drove a TGV train at 574 km per hour. When I was about 10 years old, I had an absolute obsession with this video. I would watch it every day on repeat, and it had millions of views. Everyone else loved it as well. This was such a big deal at the time, but this video to me represents the end of something. It's the end of the world's obsession with speed. Since then, there hasn't been any hype about things going fast. When the Bugatti Veyron reached the current top speed record of 490 km per hour, it got heaps of views. But it wasn't the pandemonium that the Veyron brought in the 2000s. The world was obsessed with the Bugatti Veyron. It was a legend. It defined the internet in the late 2000s. The Veyron is basically just a faster, better looking Veyron, but it doesn't have the same reputation like its predecessor. But one interesting thing about the Bugatti Veyron, and in fact everything Bugatti has made under ownership of the Volkswagen Group, is that Bugatti made a loss on almost every single car they've sold. It may have a multi-million-dollar price tag, but they cost even more to make. They actually offer pretty good value for money. But companies are not charities. Why on earth would the Volkswagen Group intentionally run a subsidiary at a loss? The more cynical viewers among you might immediately hear intentional losses and think it's some sort of dodgy taxation strategy, or perhaps they're doing it for marketing purposes. But both of these answers are wrong. The real reason they made the Veyron is a whole lot weirder. You're probably wondering right now why a channel that talks about unsuccessful or obscure race cars is making a video about an iconic road car. The Veyron is neither failed nor a racer. But by the end of the video, this will make perfect sense. You also might have noticed another pattern so far. Concorde, TGV, Bugatti Veyron. What is it about these three? They're all French, or at least partially French. This story definitely includes some French race cars, but the beginning of this story is actually a German car that made a name for itself by racing in France. This was a car that would go on to define the 24 Hours of Le Mans, a car that would set the stage for the most important and iconic manufacturer in all of sports car racing. And at the helm of that team that built it was a mad genius named Ferdinand Piech. This car is, of course, the Porsche 917. The 917 is a legendary car, and it had many versions. The 917K is the most famous of the 917s, the K being short for Kurzheck, German for short tail. This is the Golf liveried Porsche everyone remembers, but the Kurzheck isn't the fastest 917 to race at Le Mans in terms of its top speed. That honour goes to the Langheck. The 917 Langheck was a lower drag version. As the name suggests, the extended tail section was the big change from the K to the LH. For Piech, low drag was the number one priority. Old Ferdinand thought of downforce as some sort of dark magic only to be used sparingly. This mindset went so far that the 1969 version of the Porsche 917 was actually producing aerodynamic lift at the rear. It was so unstable that many refused to drive it. This was only fixed once teams noticed that no dust was collecting on the rear of the car, and that must mean no airflow over the rear either. The result was the two 917 variants, the K and the LH. Interestingly, the high drag K would go without a rear wing in 1970, whilst the lower drag LH would feature a rear wing, but this had a shallow angle of attack and was only really on the car to keep the rear wheels from being lifted off the ground. The K would go on to be more successful than the LH, but the LH did have its one party piece. It was very fast on the straights, much faster than the K. It was in 1971 when the Porsche 917 LH's party piece came into its own. On the Mulsanne straight, the Langheck reached 395 km per hour, the fastest speed ever recorded on the Mulsanne straight at the time. The 917K, now fitted with a large pair of vertical stabilizers at the rear, would again win that year, but the K doesn't have the same relevance to the Veyron that the LH has. After the 917 program, Piech was fired from Porsche. Despite the car being a huge success, it was so expensive that it nearly bankrupted the company. Piech would go on to work at Audi, and you should take note of that because it's an important thing to remember for later in the video. It seemed, after the 917 set its incredible top speed record of 395 km per hour, that it would be the final frontier of top speed records at Le Mans. Despite ever more powerful engines, race cars were focusing more and more on downforce. Even at the legendary Circuit de la Sarthe, downforce still made the cars set faster lap times. The more downforce-laden 917K had beaten the Langheck and proven to everyone that you needed not just low drag, but downforce. By the turbocharged Group C era, the top cars had all sprouted enormous rear wings. Even the 956 Langheck, which had a top speed of just 360 km per hour, had a big rear wing. Even so, 360 km per hour is a thrilling speed. I cannot imagine what it'd be like driving that fast. I can only think of one thing that would be as thrilling as that, and that would be testing out this YouTube feature that they've recently added. Because it's seriously thrilling. Take the video out of full screen for a second. Now, you've done that? Alright, now, subscribe to the channel. Now you can put it back into full screen. Anyway, back to the video. Throughout the 1980s, it seems that the 917 would be the forever record holder on the Mulsanne straight. But just when it seemed like this record would stay forever, a new competitor entered the scene. This competitor was called Walter Meunier. Walter Meunier had a reasonably long history with racing at Le Mans, since 1969 with the WMP69, the same year the Porsche 917 debuted. Over their relatively long history, the French team racked up plenty of memorable results at the 24 Hours of Le Mans, such as P18 and Did Not Arrive. At some point, it must have become clear to Walter Meunier that they didn't have a chance of actually winning the 24 Hours of Le Mans, but they wanted to go down in history one way or another, and since they couldn't win the actual race, they decided to do something nobody else was trying: to set the record for the highest speed ever recorded on a racetrack. As a result, they created what would be known as Project 400. Project 400 started with a car called the WM P87. It was powered by a Peugeot 2.9 litre turbocharged V6 producing 890 horsepower. This was a highly stressed engine, but they didn't care about reliability. They just wanted to set a high speed in the race once. Once they'd set that, that was all they needed. Le Mans was known for low drag cars, but the P87 took this even further. It featured a rear wing, but much like the 917 Langheck, this was just to keep the rear wheels on the ground. The wing had enormous end plates given its small size to really ensure that no tip vortex would escape, reducing the drag further. The rear wheels were covered and the front wheels brought inboard. The car was shaped like a teardrop, the optimal shape for aerodynamic efficiency, also known as the aerofoil shape. This meant that the P87 was a complete overhaul of its conventional predecessor, the P86. The P86 may have shared the teardrop shape in the covered rear wheels, but the rest of the P87 was completely updated. The front was considerably more rounded, the front air intake was slightly larger, the tail section was much longer, the side intakes were removed, and of course, the power significantly increased from the Peugeot engine. For the 1987 24 Hours of Le Mans, WM entered their P87 alongside the old P86. They didn't care about winning with the P87. They just wanted to set the top speed record. But, unfortunately for WM, they could only reach 356 km per hour on the Mulsanne straight in practice. This wasn't even as fast as the Porsche 962s and 959s that dominated the era, with their bigger wings and relatively reduced max power output compared to the WM. Something had gone wrong. The Peugeot engine was not working how it should be. It was an issue with the ECU. Electronic issues are always a nightmare. When mechanical systems fail, you can easily see what's wrong with it. Perhaps there's fragments of metal from a shattered component or oil sprayed all around the engine bay. When electronics go wrong, you don't take the engine cover off and go, well, there's your problem. You take the engine cover off and go, what now? It took WM's mechanics a long time to fix the problem. The result was that they only managed 2 laps in practice. Luckily for them, there was a section of nearby motorway that had recently been completed but not opened. Welter took their P87 to the motorway and got the hammer down. Based on their own internal measurements, they reached an unofficially recorded speed of 413 km per hour. With things finally looking good, they were ready to go. But just as things were finally looking promising for Welter, disaster struck. Poorer than expected fuel quality caused the P87's engine to explode. It was over. They didn't get their record. This didn't stop Welter from coming back the following year, and this time they were going to ensure that they got this record. For 1988, they had a new beast, the P88. If the P87 was a hammer, the P88 was a sledgehammer. It had its engine enlarged to 3 litres, increasing horsepower output to 910 horsepower. It had larger Venturi tunnels for downforce, allowing for an even smaller rear wing, and it even had a blown diffuser. Formula 1 is not where that started. They put the same aero upgrades on a P87 and entered that as well. Now they had 2 cars, and they were ready to go. The P87 decided to explode yet again shortly into the race, but since they'd brought 2 cars, and their strong contender was still on the move, they were still in the running to get this record. But the P88 was not running well, and it couldn't get up to its lofty top speed. They had to bring the car back to the pits, where it would remain for some time. This, however, was not an issue. WM was not interested in the result. They didn't even need to finish. They had a whole 24 hours to get the car working again. All they needed was one good run down the Mulsanne straight and they'd have it. And after completing what was essentially a mid-race shakedown after finally getting the car out of the garage and back up and running, they selected the engine's highest performance setting and went for the record. Heading down the Mulsanne Straight, the WM reached an insane speed of 407 kilometers per hour. They had done it. They'd not only beaten the Porsche 917 Langheck, they'd also broken the 400 km per hour mark, and by quite some margin. The car retired from the race shortly after. The engine failed. But this simply did not matter. They had what they wanted. 407 km per hour was the only number that mattered. Given the fact that Peugeot powered the car, they would go on to use this car in their marketing. But weirdly, they claimed the WM P88 was actually slower than it was. In Peugeot's marketing, they claimed a top speed of just 405 km per hour rather than 407. But why in the world would they sell themselves short? The answer is simple. They'd released the Peugeot 405 recently, and so a top speed of 405 was perfect for marketing the sedan. This, of course, is where the story would usually end. But a character from earlier in this story was absolutely furious. This furious man was named Ferdinand Piech, and he was now working for Audi. His 917 was no longer the fastest car at Le Mans, and in 1990 they put chicanes on the Mulsanne Straight so he couldn't even take the record back. To him, the P88 was not a legitimate record holder. It wasn't a serious race car like the 917. It wasn't designed to be able to last for 24 hours. It had no intention of finishing the race. His now ex-record-breaking car was a serious race car, and now no serious race car could ever get this record thanks to WM and their unserious car. He needed to find a new way of getting back at those who'd taken his record, and 3 years later, the mad genius would begin to lay the foundations. In 1993, he was appointed CEO and chairman of the Volkswagen Group, and he was seemingly set on world domination. Soon after Piech's rise to power, the Volkswagen Group began buying up companies like they were bottles of milk at the supermarket. This came at its fastest pace in 1998. 10th of July 1998, Volkswagen Group subsidiary Audi buys Lamborghini. 22nd of July 1998, Volkswagen Group buys Bentley. But it was the 22nd of December when the most important Piech purchase came, when the Volkswagen Group bought Bugatti. Initially, it seemed that Bugatti would change to being a brand that produced large saloon cars. Not only did it seem they'd make large saloon cars, but they were also absolutely hideous. But one of their concept cars, after the Volkswagen Group takeover, was called the 183 Chiron. The 183 was powered by, as the name suggests, a naturally aspirated W18 engine. That's right, 18 cylinders. Ferdinand Piech must have looked at the 183 Chiron and thought, we can't beat WM on the track anymore with these chicanes. But I know what we can do. A year later, they showed up with a concept car called the EB184 Veyron. They would later revise this to the EB164 and would announce to the world that they were going to make a production car with 1,000 horsepower and a top speed of over 400 kilometers per hour. Upon announcing this, they were taken very seriously.
You know the Bugatti Veyron? Are you familiar? Yeah, it's this Volkswagen bought Bugatti and said, we're going to make a supercar that's got 1,000 horsepower. Which sounds great, but they haven't yet worked out how such a thing might be possible.
They just said it.
They just said it. Anyway, they're still working away on it.
400 kilometers per hour seemed ridiculous. That was almost 20 kilometers per hour faster than the current record of 386. And remember, every additional kilometer per hour of top speed requires even more power and drag reduction than the last one. Nobody took what Piech said seriously. Except for Piech. Piech took what Piech said seriously. And when he says something can be done, it usually can be. Ferdinand Piech is the man that Elon Musk wishes he was, because the difference is, Ferdinand Piech is an actual engineer. But in 1999, even after all his amazing achievements, it seemed that he'd really talked himself into a corner this time. The car faced numerous issues during development, leading to its delayed launch by multiple years. In addition to the engine melting, there was issues with the level of refinement, the brakes, the steering, and pretty much everything else. Then there was the issue of tyres. Bugatti wanted the Veyron to be a comfortable Grand Tourer, but in order for the tyres to not explode at the speeds exceeding 400 km per hour, they needed stiffer sidewalls than any other tyres, and would therefore not provide the necessary ride comfort, so the suspension then needed work. But working on the suspension had to be done in a way that doesn't compromise stability. Then there were the cooling issues. They needed to put in way more cooling for the 1000 horsepower engine, but cooling creates drag, and drag needs more power to be overcome, which needs more cooling, but cooling causes drag, which needs more power to be overcome. You get the picture. You start chasing your tail with it. But if you've talked your way into a corner, the best thing you can do is engineer your way out, and that's exactly what Bugatti did. They managed to resolve the car's numerous problems and conducted stringent reliability tests. One example of this is to do with the clutches. For comparison, the Ferrari Enzo from the same era would need to be sent back to Italy to have its clutch replaced after doing 3 launches with full throttle. It was a very fragile car. Bugatti didn't want their car to be that fragile, so they conducted a test where they would do consecutive full throttle launches until the clutch failed. They stopped after 200 consecutive full throttle launches with their 1000 horsepower engine putting power to all 4 wheels, not because the clutches failed, but because it was getting dark. Doing 200 consecutive launches is cool, but the car was designed primarily for one target. It had to be faster than 407 kilometers per hour. Piech would not accept anything less, and on the 19th of April 2005, Bugatti would set out to test their car in front of German inspectors. This was the make or break. Could they pull it off? Of course they could. 408.51 kilometers per hour, a new world record, 1.5 kilometers per hour faster than the WM P88. This made it the fastest production car in the world. Piech got his payback, and to really rub salt in the wounds, they had James May then go and drive the car at 407 kilometers per hour. The message he sent was clear. You can go faster than my serious race car with your unserious race car. But I can go faster than your unserious race car with a serious road car, and I can do it with James May at the wheel. That there is exactly why they made the Veyron. It has absolutely nothing to do with advertising the VW group. Did anyone in the world buy a 1 litre Polo because they saw the Bugatti Veyron go 408 kilometers per hour? Did that really happen? Ever? Wouldn't it make more sense to call it the Volkswagen Veyron if they wanted to advertise VW? The car did not make commercial sense. It never did. It never will. It was never supposed to. The Veyron was created to do one thing and one thing only: settle the score. And that's exactly what they did. A lot of German engineering may have gone into the Bugatti Veyron, but at the end of the day, it is still a French car, and continues the long-standing tradition of making very comfortable forms of transport go very, very fast. So remember, viewers, next time someone tries to tell you, the French wouldn't do that. Oh yes, they would.
It's all about humanity. About humanity. It's all about humanity.